In this video, I'm going to break down some of the Real Madrid projected transfers this summer. We're looking at a few players who have been linked with Zubimendi, we've been linked with Huijsen, and a couple of different players, William Saliba. Today there was a few reports that came out from L'Equipe about Real Madrid trying to get William Saliba. How realistic that is with him just signing a contract extension, I have no clue. But if I'm a betting man, and knowing Real Madrid and the way we've been signing players, I don't think William Saliba is a realistic option. So in this video, I'm going to break down some of the players that we're linked with. I'm not going to include Trent in this because obviously the Trent deal looks like it's pretty much finalized according to Fabrizio Romano. Everything is on track with the Trent signing, so we can almost consider that a done deal at this point. But one thing I do want to highlight in this video is that it does seem like Florentino Perez is trying to move Real Madrid into a new direction. Because if you look at the profile of some of the players that we have in our team, they differ to some of the players that we're linked with. And that likely means that Florentino Perez now understands that Real Madrid does need these types of players who are more possession type players, more technical players that are going to be playing in the midfield. You know, Huijsen is a technical center back. He's really good at line breaking passes. So let's get into the nitty gritty of this. By the way, if you guys are new here, just make sure you guys like and subscribe. Let's first start with Reijnders. Hopefully I'm saying that right, by the way. Reijnders is a Dutch midfielder. He came up in the Eredivisie. He was signed to AC Milan and he's been making a name for himself because this is a guy that potentially fits the profile of midfielders Real Madrid needs right now. So what's interesting is there was a study done on the best fitting players for that box-to-box midfield position. He had an almost 98% match because of his ability both defensively and going forward. But there's a few holes, a few gaps in his game that make it questionable if he's truly a Real Madrid quality player. If you look at the scatter plot above, you can see that in slide tackling versus interceptions, in both metrics, Reijnders scores above average, but it's safe to say he's not a big performer in either metrics. Reijnders is under average from a ball progression standpoint, over 90 minutes. Defensively, he's not the best either, but he is a very technical midfielder who's really good with the ball at his feet. He's really good at dribbling. But when you look at successful dribbles, Reijnders is above average. You can see this in the visual. Compared to other players who have played 900 minutes, Reijnders is above average in both metrics. What's interesting is how he makes through passes. He scores in the high average, but the intent of the through pass does tell a lot about how he can help in the attack. When Reijnders comes high up the pitch, he can be the player with the through pass that is pre-assist, second to assist. He opens up the play with his through passes. Also from an assist perspective, he's above the average. He scores above most midfielders. So although Reijnders is a highly skilled midfielder who can play in the defensive midfield, but is also considered a central midfielder, his defensive qualities aren't the best for a defensive midfielder. But what makes Reijnders a really good potential profile for Real Madrid is how good he is on the ball. This is a guy who can evade pressure with his dribbling. This is a guy who's pretty decent at progressing the ball forward. And this is a guy who also, with the right team and the right fit, he could take his game to the next level. But for Real Madrid to be linked with this guy, who obviously he's in his mid-20s now, this is not an 18-year-old who has a high ceiling where he's going to be completely going through some of these metrics over the next couple of years. Good all-round player, good squad player, but certainly not what Real Madrid needs. Now, if you told me this is the guy who's going to be replacing Dani Ceballos for whatever reason because Dani Ceballos wanted to leave Real Madrid, then I'm in favor of getting this guy. This is a good squad player. But in terms of Real Madrid really going after Reijnders, I don't think he's the right fit. And the other thing is with Reijnders is he has a long-term contract. So in terms of Real Madrid getting him for free, because if you told me we can get a player like this for free, that's a whole different story. But he's not going to be a player without a contract very soon. So the signing of Reijnders needs to be pretty much out of the board's head at this point, especially if we're trying to take this team to the next level, trying to get the best players in the world. Zubimendi is another player that Real Madrid is linked with. Apparently, Xabi Alonso has told different people at Real Madrid that Zubimendi is a guy that he wants to bring with him if he was to come to Real Madrid. It's very likely Xabi Alonso will be the next manager, and he seems to really like Zubimendi. But let's break Zubimendi's qualities down a little bit more in depth to see, is this a Real Madrid quality player? Because Mikel Arteta has been reportedly trying to get him for a long time. So why is it that some of the top teams in Europe want to sign Zubimendi? One of Zubimendi's standout attributes is his ability to recover the ball. He ranks in the 97th percentile. He averages 12 ball recoveries in 90 minutes. That is significantly above most midfielders in his position in La Liga. His defensive actions per 90 minutes averages almost 18 defensive actions. He also has an average of 89% pass accuracy. That puts him in the 91st percentile. And also pass completion under pressure, he's at 86%. That also puts him in the 91st percentile. So what does that tell you? Zubimendi is a press-resistant midfielder. He's the guy who completes most of his passes. But once you dig more deeply into the numbers, you see that there are a few areas where he has weaknesses. Zubimendi is not the best at 1v1 defending. Again, Kroos, when he was at Real Madrid, he was really good on the ball. Obviously, you don't need me to tell you that. But where he wasn't the best was tracking defenders behind him. So it's understandable to have that gap in your ability. But another issue with Zubimendi, he completes about 62% of his long-range passing. Typically for a single pivot player like a Zubimendi, a profile of player like this, who plays in the 6, what we see on average is about 70% pass completion. Obviously, you're never going to see another Toni Kroos in our generation potentially, who's completing like 96% of his long-range passing. But for Zubimendi to be completing only 62% of his long-range passing is a bit of an issue. And the passes that he is completing, the long-range passing, the weight of the pass isn't the best. Simply put, he's really good at line-breaking short passes, but the long-range passing, I'm talking about those diagonals, those switches of the point of attack, he's really bad at that. But he's not really bad at successfully dribbling with the ball. He has about a 53% dribble completion whenever he takes on his man, whenever he tries to dribble out of pressure. Now, the big thing with Zubimendi is price is going to be a factor with this guy because obviously a lot of the clubs across Europe want to sign him. The fact that Arsenal wants him and they're willing to pay. Of course, Real Madrid can pay as much as Arsenal, but Real Madrid has a very strict policy when it comes to transfers. So Zubimendi's contract ends the summer of 2027. It's likely the Sociedad will accept about a $50 million offer for him. But again, for Real Madrid to sign Zubimendi, pay $50 million. Have a guy who's completing about 90% of his passes. Have a guy who's really good at passing the ball short. And he's really good at winning 50-50 duels in the midfield. If you told me we had to pay $50 million for a profile of a player like this, I'm really reluctant to do so, given the quality of some of the midfielders that we have. Zubimendi is a good midfielder. But is he a Real Madrid caliber midfielder? I don't think he is. The stats say that he improves and he completes more passes, more dribbles, everything in big matches in the Champions League. But it's obvious that Real Madrid needs, in that midfield, a guy who's highly technical, but also a short and long range pass. Inevitably, when you have a guy who's completing only 60% of his long range passing, you're going to run into issues. And that could be the fine margins between winning titles and not. But I don't think having a guy who only completes 60% of his passes is going to cut it for Real Madrid. So to me, I'm not in favor of going for Zubimendi. Zubimendi is a great player because it's likely what Xabi Alonso sees from him is that this is a guy who can play in the pivot. I can play him with Tchouaméni. I can play him with Fede. This is a guy who's going to dictate the play. He's going to control the tempo. He's going to also help us win the ball back. But I haven't seen enough from a statistical standpoint that made me say this is a guy that's going to help us win Champions League after Champions League. Now, the Huijsen transfer. Huijsen reportedly has a release clause that's 58 million euros. And apparently Real Madrid is reluctant to pay that much, which blows my mind considering the fact that Real Madrid, according to Forbes, was the most profitable club. So then the next question is Huijsen even worth that price tag? Let's go into the statistics and see why is it that Manchester City, Arsenal, Real Madrid, Juve, Bayern Munich, all these clubs want to get this guy. First of all, he's both-footed, only 19 years old. He's really good at front foot defending. He's really good at stepping out of the back, keeping an eye on progressive passes. That's really his strength. Huijsen is not afraid to carry the ball as well as initiate a very difficult pass. Huijsen is aggressive in his defensive work. He ranks second in true interceptions. He's averaging about 4 interceptions per 1,000 opportunities or 1,000 touches. In terms of aerial duels won, he's in the 12th percentile. Again, scoring very well, very high. Again, ranking amongst the best. Shots blocked, also the 7th percentile. So overall, defensively, we're looking at a very solid generational player. Huijsen is comfortable with stepping out and stifling attacks before they develop, with 4.1 true interceptions, but the second highest amongst center backs in the Premier League. The modern game center backs are commonly asked to defend in wide areas in 1v1 duels. making Huijsen's proactive style a perfect fit for Real Madrid. Because this is something we often see Antonio Rudiger and Raul Asensio do, is they're constantly going out into the wings and stifling defenders. This is a player who does not mind stepping out of his position to stifle a potential attack or transition opportunity. If you look at this example, the game against Netherlands, the ball is played into Depay. Huijsen jumps out of his position in Spain's back line to intercept the ball. However, Depay uses his body excellently to protect the ball, spinning into a space and lofting the ball. And that was a gap that was left in behind him. So again, he's a very good defender. With experience and time, he's going to get even better, because we all know that Sergio Ramos, if he wasn't able to win the ball, he's taking the man out as well. He's not giving him that opportunity to run in behind. But his manager described his mentality is that he's confident and not afraid of marking any forward, and he's calm on the ball. He knows what he's doing, he's under control, and sometimes he'll make mistakes like others, but there's always a reason for things he does. And for someone who is 19, it's really strange to find this level. Now again, this is coming from his manager. All the reports seem to indicate that this is a guy who's very strong mentally. This is a guy that's only 19 years old, a generational defender. And although Real Madrid is reportedly interested in William Saliba, that's not a very realistic option. But a guy who's going to cost you 60 million euros to activate his release clause is a much more realistic option. Now, one of the last things I'll wrap up this video by looking at is his share of passes and carries that are progressive in comparison to other defenders in the Premier League. This is where Dean Huijsen stands in comparison to other players. You can see that he's ranking very high. So again, this is a guy who's not afraid to take those chances. This is a guy who's going to help your team not only defend, but he's also going to be potentially a guy who creates opportunities for you in matches where maybe you're down and you need a little bit more creativity from the back and you need somebody to take chances to win a header in the box. That's why you have a guy like this. But if we have Dean Huijsen joining us, Alexander-Arnold, and if we sign a left back, a Miguel Gutierrez or somebody else, then the profile of Real Madrid will change next season. But there's no doubt that Real Madrid still needs somebody in the center of the park who controls the tempo. Dani Ceballos has been pretty good at doing that role this season. But even when we saw in the Copa del Rey final when Luka Modric comes in, the quality on the ball in the middle of the park just drastically improved. Today, Arda Güler completed 100% of his passes in the first half against Celta Vigo. Is Arda Güler going to be a player who is used in a deeper position? Reportedly, Xabi Alonso really likes Arda Güler. And I don't know what that means for Arda in terms of, does he play more as a playmaker in a deeper position? Will Xabi Alonso play him a little higher up the pitch? Obviously, Rodrigo seems to be unhappy and potentially looking to leave Real Madrid. There's so many things that we just don't know that we'll find out very soon. But just make sure you guys subscribe to stay up to date with all the latest information about Real Madrid. Thank you all for watching, and Hala Madrid.